So let's just quickly revise the general journal. So the general journal, first of all, will have 6 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Debit, credit, debit, credit, debit, credit. Okay. The first debit credit I'm always going to use. The second debit credit, this one, I will only use if it's influencing my debtor's control. So in other words, if a debtor is charged with interest, his account will increase, but the total debt of the debtors will also increase. Okay. This last debit credit will only be used once we use the creditors, if it has an influence on the creditors' control. So, the first transactions we did was bad debt. Okay. So, the first thing we did with bad debt is we said, bad debt is written off from a debtor's debt if we cannot find him. Do we stop looking for him? No. But we write him off in our books and we call that principle the principle of prudence. We are being conservative. We're not expecting to get that money. So, bad debt is an expense and it makes the debtor's debt less. So, in other words, if I had to do the AOL, I would debit bad debt and I would credit debtor's control. Everybody shop with that. Because bad debt is an expense that increases and the debtor's debt decreases because I'm writing it off. Now to write it in this journal, I said there's rules. Debit always first, credit second. Okay? And then I showed you, if you turn your AOL, you can see what's first. Bad debt, second, debtor's control. So, I'm going to debit bad debt with whatever amount that I calculate, right? Then I'm going to credit debtor's control. But I'm not allowed to write someone's debtor's control here. So I'm going to write the name of the person. Because his debt is getting less with 80. But my total debtors is also getting less with 80. You guys with me? Okay. So that was bad debt. Then we had a second scenario where I had bad debt and bank. Now, how does that work? This is when a debtor is insolvent. Involvement. Insolvent. Remember, this is a legal thing. So then what happens is I'm going to do the bad debt for the amount that's written off. And I'm going to do the normal CRJ for the amount I receive because I'm going to get some of the money and the rest I must bad debt. Okay. Then we went and we did interest. So, the third thing we did was interest. Now we did interest on an overdue debtor and interest on an overdue creditor. Okay. Now if it's interest on an overdue debtor, it's money that's going to come in. I haven't received it yet, so I can't put it in the CRJ, but it's an income. You see, this is an income. Money on an overdue creditor, on the other hand, is something I'm going to have to pay later, CPJ. So for me, that is an expense. Okay. So if I have to do the AOL, and why do I always do the AOL? Because it makes my life easier. Because now what's going to happen? The debtor's debt is going to increase. So I'm going to debit him. the interest on overdue debt is an income. That's why I credit it. You see, they're both increasing. So, if I write it in there, what comes first? The debtor. Not allowed to write debtor, so I write the name of the debtor, ne? And interest on overdue debt. Okay? Say it's 8 rand. But now this guy's debt increases, which means debtor's total debt increased. Can you see, if I debit the name, I'm going to debit the control. If I credit the name, I'm going to credit the control. Because what happens to the one person, makes an influence on the total. Okay, so the same thing is happening. Is everybody with me? Yes. Now let's do the credit. So now the creditor is going to charge me interest. So now I know that interest, and I'm not going to write it out, is now an expense. And the creditor, my debt, is going to increase. So I'm going to debit interest on overdue creditor, and I'm going to credit the creditor. Let's say 10 rand. Now, the name is credited, which means the creditor's control is credited. Can you see that? Okay. The next thing we did was drawings and donations of things other than money. Ne? So they can take real stationery, or they can take some of the stock. And then we are not going to use the debtors and the creditors because it doesn't influence them. So what will happen with that is I will just say, okay, every time drawings debit, let's say trading stock credit, debit credit. Donation debit, trading stock credit, debit credit. You see? So this is exactly how the AOL would look like. Drawings will be debit, trading stock credit. Donation would be debit, trading stock credit. And trading stock, I'm always going to use the cost price, not the sales price. Now, let's say I'm taking drawings, but I'm taking stationery. Then I will replace the trading stock with stationery. Can I ask you this? What would happen if I say to you, the owner is returning some of the stock he took as drawings because he didn't use it? What would the entry be then? Yes. Yes, I will just swap it. Then I will say trading stock drawings, because now my trading stock is becoming more again because he brings back the stock and his drawings gets less. So what am I saying to you? Whenever you do the general journal, go back to what you know. What is what you know? The AOL. And the AOL, you know, what is debited here and credited there will be here, debit, credit. Okay, and then we did now, what we did today, the transfer of balances.